Good morning, church. Welcome to another edition of Daily Bible Videos with your pastors. Today we're talking Exodus 16, 17, and 18. Some real good stuff in here, so let's just get started. So in chapter 16, verse 2, we can see some grumbling going on here, and I want to touch a little bit on this business of grumbling. When we think about grumbling, what do you think it is about grumbling that the Lord hates so much? I've often thought about that, and I think this is what I've been brought to this place. Grumbling is essentially me saying, if I was God and I was in charge, I would do this differently. It is expressing the reality that we are completely dissatisfied with how God is allowing this to play out in our lives or some situation that we don't appreciate. And it is actually a strong form of rebellion to the Lord. It's an unsubmissiveness to where He is leading us. And we grumble when we would rather be on the throne than God. And if you look at verses 7 and 8 in chapter 16, you will see that God actually makes an interesting connection to when the Israelites in verse 2 are grumbling against Moses and Aaron. Now God is actually declaring, no, they're actually grumbling against me because I'm the one that's put you in charge. And so be careful, church, when we're tempted to complain, especially against authority figures. Let's just be careful, because we know that there is no authority except from God, and we want to be cautious that we're not also grumbling in such a way that we are saying to God, in essence, I don't like what you're doing here. If I was in charge, I'd do it different. Then if we're going to look at verses 4 and 5, if we flip back, we can see the institution of a daily miracle for the next 40 years for the Israelites. We see that God is going to give them bread every day, and He is going to do something really special on the Sabbath day in giving them bread for 2 days. And then we see in verses 33 and 34 that He is going to actually give them manna, 1 jar's worth, that's going to last for generations. This is an amazing miracle, and it very obviously symbolizes Jesus Christ. Isn't it amazing? Jesus refers to Himself in John chapter 6 that He is the bread of life. And I find it interesting, even to the fact that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and the word Bethlehem means house of bread. Jesus is our bread of life, and we need to go to Him every day to hear Him, to know Him, to have Him speak into our lives. And those words of Jesus is what we live on spiritually for sustenance and growth. Awesome stuff. Then if we're going to flip to chapter 17, we see that there is water coming out of this rock. We're pretty familiar with this story, but here's something interesting to think about. In 1 Corinthians 10, it tells us that this rock, the people drank from this rock, and that rock was Christ. It's interesting that Moses was commanded to strike the rock, and then water would flow out of it, and the people could receive the water. And in that same way, Jesus was struck. And in Jesus being struck and allowing Himself to be killed for our sake, we can now receive this water, this refreshing, if you will, through what Jesus' death on the cross has bought for us. Just amazing stuff. And then if we look back into, or look forward into verses 12 and 13, we can see that the Israelites are now in a battle, and Moses is going to hold the rod of God over them, and as long as that rod is being held, they are in victory. But as soon as his hands grow weary and they fall, they are starting to get defeated. And so Aaron and Hur come along, and I just love this beautiful picture of how they recognize that victory is tied to Moses holding that rod up, and they can't hold it. They're not the ones who are leading. And so what do? They come along and they bear up Moses' arms, and they're able to win the fight. Friends, this is a good question to ask. Lord, is there someone in my life who needs my help to hold up their arms in their life and to walk alongside them to bear their burdens? Ask the Lord if there's somebody in your life like that today. Then if we flip to chapter 18, we can see Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, coming to visit him. And I just want to pull out one point here from verses 17 and 18, in which Moses' father-in-law identifies something in Moses' life where he needs some wisdom, some instruction, and some correction. And he says to him, you need to allow other people to help you in the burden of leading all these people. And Moses wisely heeds the advice of his father-in-law, and he allows others who are equipped to help him with the work. And isn't that neat? We are praying this year in Pansy Chapel about equipping and how God is going to equip others to help with the work that He's doing in our church. I just think this is a neat connection to how we are trusting Him for this in our very own church. And so here's another maybe couple of questions that you want to ask the Lord about that. First of all, do you let others help you? Do you trust others to help you? Or do you try and get it all done on your own? We will never accomplish what God intends for us to accomplish if we are loners, if we're just going to work alone. We need to trust others to help us in our lives accomplish what God calls us to do. And the second thing, are we willing to receive wisdom, instruction, and correction from others that will lead us to be more fruitful and effective in our lives? Ask the Lord those two questions about your own life and your leadership, and trust Him to give you steps to follow that will lead you to increased fruitfulness. Blessings.